So good afternoon, everyone. Roxana, are we ready to start, or do we need a moment longer?
We're all set, Michael.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, now for something quite different in the Aid for Trade Stocktaking event program. Let me start by introducing myself. So my name is Michael Roberts, and I head the Aid for Trade unit at the WTO in the Development Division. And we are the unit that's been responsible for the organization of the stocktaking event. Now, when we came to plan this event last year, we realized that we hadn't actually been outside Geneva since the start of the pandemic. Our horizons had shrunk. So we have a pretty good idea of what the impact of COVID has been where we work, where we live. But the only images that we really had about the impact of COVID outside of Geneva, outside of neighboring France, were the images that we got from news reports. So we came together with the Enhanced Integrated Framework for Least Developed Countries, and my colleagues at the Information and External Relations Division at WTO, and we had an idea, which is, why don't we look at the impact of trade through your eyes? What does the impact look like in your part of the world? The pandemic is a common health threat, but not necessarily one that we're all living the same. So in the next 60 minutes, we'll present to you the photos that we received, and you're starting to see some of those photos already. So thanks, Bijava, for projecting those. Unfortunately, we can't project all of those photos. We received more than 120 in total, submitted by 52 contestants. And what those photos do is try and answer three questions. Those questions are: how has trade been impacted by the COVID pandemic where you are? Is trade making a difference? And if so, how? And how do you see trade helping economic recovery? Now, most of the submissions that we received actually addressed that first question. Submissions came from a little bit all over the world, which was very satisfying. And in the slide that you'll see at the end, you can see that about 45 of those submissions came from Africa, 20% from Asia, and 15% from Eastern and Central Europe, and 5% from the Pacific. You saw those ladies sitting, weaving. They were in one of the Pacific islands. So we've had a fantastic geographical range. And also we have a very good range in terms of the topics that we've received. These cover the impact that sanitary measures have had on firms. So you'll see photos with businesses and with their shutters down. You'll see people making medical personal protection equipment, people wearing PPE and carrying on business and trade as normal, social distancing in markets. You saw already an example of that in the square around that lady who was selling fruit and vegetables. You see the move to cashless payments. So that gentleman selling flowers had a little QR code for people to make cashless payments, and many other themes that we're going to discuss as we go through the contest. So to encourage participation, we decided to offer a small prize, and the winner is going to receive a DSLR photo camera. And also we'll make sure that the photos are projected, submitted, and disseminated on digital and social media accounts of the Enhanced Integrated Framework and WTO. But before I go any further, let's meet our panel. So I'm delighted to be joined by Annette Sesay-Mwemba, and Annette is the Deputy Executive Director of the EIF. So Annette, perhaps I could ask you to just say a few words about the photos that we've received.
Thank you, Michael. Hi, everybody, and I hope you're all well. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening from wherever you're joining us. Michael, thank you so much for this intro. The photos were extremely revealing. And for me, I'm working with the EIF, a program that supports capacity, trade capacity for LDCs. The pictures, the photos spoke to the areas where we work. I could already get a sense of trade facilitation challenges. I saw e-commerce, women economic empowerment. All these are areas that we're very, very keen and interested in from an LDC perspective. And so we were able to understand the situation, the impact of COVID in some of the LDCs through the pictures. Like they say, a picture tells 1,000 words. We definitely saw those 1,000 words in some of the photos. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Annette. I'm also very glad to be joined by Jana Borges, who is the head of audiovisual and social media in the Information and External Relations Division at WTO. Jana, did you want to say a few words also about the photos?
Yes, hi, hello everybody. Good to be here with Annette and Michael and other colleagues. We've ran a few competitions in the past, mostly video competitions. I'm always very positively surprised by what I see. This time was even more interesting because we were able to see local flavors from Ukraine to Uganda to Costa Rica and more of this one common global experience that we have faced this past 12 months. So it was very enriching to see, to take a little peek of how other people are facing the same reality that we are, in a sense. So it was a privilege to be part of this, and I'm really excited about unveiling the winner today.
Great. Now, our final panelist is Olivier Girard, and Olivier is a professional photographer, and he does work with the EIF and WTO. Now, Olivier is based in Niger, so he won't be joining us in person, unfortunately, but he's recorded a little message for us. So please, do we want to play that recording now? In the recording, he tells us what he looks for in a photograph from a professional perspective. So please, let's hear from Olivier.
Qu'est-ce qu'une bonne photo? Il a des critères objectifs et d'analyse d'une photo qu'il suffit d'appliquer pour répondre à la question. Mais les critères objectifs ne sont que des critères techniques. Comment est mon sujet? Comment les définir? Un symbole, un paysage, une personne publique, un espace. Que vois-je apparaître en avant-plan, en arrière-plan? La photo est-elle nette, floue? Sa composition, l'exposition, les contrastes, les couleurs sont-elles correctes? Sont-elles conformes à la réalité? Mais est-ce que c'est suffisant pour décider qu'une image est bonne? Envisager de définir sa production sous ce seul angle revient à considérer la photographie comme une technique et non un art. La photo, ce n'est pas qu'une technique de reproduction. C'est un acte de création au sens large du terme. Ce faisant, on ne peut pas affirmer qu'une photo est bonne par le seul fait qu'elle est réussie techniquement, car ce serait oublier finalement l'essentiel, la part de subjectivité que révèle cette image. La subjectivité prend le pas sur l'analyse objective. Par exemple, une image peut être floue, mais la valeur émotionnelle prévaut largement sur la valeur purement esthétique, dont la recherche n'était pas le but. Tout dépend du message que vous voulez faire passer. Et parfois, le message est si fort qu'il oublie les défauts techniques de l'image. Mais si nous souhaitons aller plus loin dans l'analyse, demandons-nous si nous pouvons vraiment opposer l'objectivité et la subjectivité, la recherche purement esthétique et l'approche émotionnelle. Je dirais qu'une photo qui a du sens, émeut, qui interpelle et qui de surcroît est techniquement réussie vaut mieux qu'une photo creuse, sans aucun sens et totalement ratée. Mais entre les deux, tout est possible. Une photo peut être bonne techniquement, mais ne pas vous parler. Inversement, une photo peut vous parler, même si formellement parlant, ce n'est pas un chef-d'œuvre. Tout dépend de ce que l'on privilégie ou ce que vous préférez. Toutefois, il y a un principe à respecter. Moins une photo a de fond, de signification, d'émotion, plus la forme doit être parfaite. Et réciproquement, plus une image vous parle moins, la forme est importante. Ma sélection pour les images. La première, gagnante pour moi, la 28, Trading durant la pandémie. Au niveau de la composition, je la trouve parfaite. L'isolement du logisticien dans ses colonnes de carton parle d'elle-même. Pour moi, elle fait la référence aux articles de presse sur l'explosion des commandes en ligne liées à l'isolement des personnes. L'isolement a favorisé et restructuré les modes de consommation. La deuxième image de Selling Flower 42. Ce qui me fascine dans cette photo, c'est les interactions entre les personnes. Les expressions sur chaque visage montrent les tensions entre les individus, peut-être liées au manque de distanciation sociale, représentées par les deux personnes sur la droite. Peut-être ont-elles peur que la femme ne prenne que les meilleures ou les plus jolies. On observe aussi le vendeur neutre dans son rôle de vendeur. Cette photo montre aussi la pression économique sur les petits vendeurs de rue, la possibilité que la matière première vienne à manquer par la fermeture des marchés ou la réduction des journées ouvrables. La troisième photo, c'est celle avec la vendeuse de légumes 271 Meter X15. La petite vendeuse de légumes, la perspective et l'angle utilisé donnent toute autre dimension à cette image. Par exemple, si l'angle avait été au même niveau que la vendeuse, nous n'aurions pas eu les différents espaces dessinés sur le sol pour le respect des distanciations sociales. Elle est symbolique aussi de la nécessité que ces petits exploitants sont obligés de vendre leur production s'ils ne veulent pas tout perdre.
So thanks, Olivier, for that. The key point I think to take from that is, what are the photos that speak to us? So you've heard Olivier's selection in terms of those that spoke to him on artistic merits, and he's given the reasons why. But obviously others of us work on trade and development issues, and so they spoke to us in different ways. And what we'll hear throughout the rest of this 60 minutes is how those photos spoke to us. Now, if this was a game show, I would be phoning a friend and asking them to help me answer a question. So if it was who wants to be a millionaire, difficult question, I'm going to pick up the phone and call a friend. Jana has mentioned that there were flavors and strong tastes that were given off several of the photos. So let me call in now my colleague and friend, Doa Abdal Mutal. So Doa is a councillor in the Agriculture and Commodities Division at the WTO. And the reason I wanted to give you a call, Doa, is for this point about the flavors that are coming off. So a lot of these photos, I think it's about 45% of the photos, are actually about market themes with lots of fresh produce on display. So here's my question to you. Are you surprised that we received so many photos that feature food? Over to you, Doa.
Thank you very much, Michael, and congratulations to all of you for this incredibly powerful and exciting event. The photos are breathtaking, and I'll tell you, Michael, what I saw in them. For me, the biggest take was probably what was not in the photos, but communicated through them, which is the sense that people were waiting to cross borders, waiting to sell their products, waiting to trade. And it's that weight and the heaviness of that weight that comes across, which really speaks to the COVID period. At the outset of the COVID crisis, as you all know, there was tremendous concern that what was a health crisis would become a food crisis too. At the very outset of the crisis, we saw a wave of food export restrictions, countries wanting to hoard their food and keep it for themselves. There was so much concern about that the heads of 3 international organizations, the WTO, the FAO, and the World Health Organization, joined hands on 31 March to issue a joint statement calling upon the world to exercise restraint, to not apply beggar thy neighbor policies, but to think of those countries that cannot survive and cannot fulfill their food security needs without the importation of food. Now, the good news is we have seen a lot of solidarity in this crisis, and we have seen a lot of the export restrictions that were initiated at the outset be rolled back. In fact, relative to the 2008 food price crisis, export restrictions have hit a much smaller percentage of food trade. In 2008, export restrictions hit 30% of food trade. In 2020, only 6%. We have also seen a lot of measures taken by governments to actually facilitate trade in food as a result of the pandemic, and this has been very positive. As a whole, and in conclusion, I would say that agriculture has been resilient, Michael, to the COVID crisis. But what we have seen is a huge logistical disruption shock, which has come across very strongly in these photos. Congratulations to you all. This is a wonderful event.
Thank you so much, Doa. And that was a great overview. And keep up the good work, both you and your colleagues in the Agriculture Division. So let's now move on. And what we're going to do in the rest of the session is to look at 8 photos in a bit more detail. So these were the 8 photos that the panel found that spoke to them the most. What we'll do is, to keep the suspense, we'll go from 8, count you down from 8 down to 1. For those of us who grew up listening to Top of the Pops and other shows, that's the way they do it. So we have to count down. So in at number 8, on the WTO photo contest hit parade, we have the following photo. Delivery is safety. Now, that photo was taken by Roman Baluk in Ukraine. Jana, can I, and it features a delivery service employed on the streets of Lviv in Ukraine. So, Jana, can I hand over to you, and so you can tell us what you like about that photo?
Thanks, Michael. So this photo was taken in mid-April last year, which was the beginning of the pandemic now when we look back, but at the time it felt like it had been forever, and that we were already in a new normal. Roman tells us that this is one of the busiest streets in the city, a tourist hotspot, and we see no one in this photo bar the lone delivery person. It reminds us, in my view, that trading services has not recovered from the pandemic hit, and worse, while delayed shipments of goods eventually made their way to their destination, most services trade is lost forever. Those who may have wanted to visit Ukraine at that point in time will no longer take that trip. That's lost revenue forever for the shops in the square, for the hotels who would have received tourists. It's an enduring impact for many countries, and we know that many smaller developing countries and least developed countries count on tourism as a main source of revenue and tax collection. On the visual aspects of the photo, for me, the composition is very interesting because we see this little bit dash of color in the buildings and in the back. But overall, it's a very great picture. And then this orange dot representing all the movement in the image. So I found this composition very, very interesting. The delivery man and his orange bag and jacket, they capture our attention immediately. It's like a speck of life in a ghost town. And we all, like in everywhere, we all have to thank those workers who came to our doors when it was not safe to go outside, regardless of where we live. So I think this photo really represents what we were looking for, both in terms of trade and in terms of how life was during the pandemic. In general, from all the photos I've seen, and that we've seen very interesting photos, very good photos. He's one of my favorite photographers. He sent a few other pictures that we saw earlier in the slideshows, and I think he does an excellent job. So I think his place among 8 finalists is very well merited.
Thank you so much for that. And if I'm not mistaken, it's also a very light snow as well. So that's what made me feel very sorry also for that delivery rider rather. It must be pretty cold on a bike in that weather. So I completely agree with you on that. And thanks, Roman, for sending that in. Now, let's go to number 7. So Vijay, do you want to project that image? Okay, now on artistic merits, this photo probably wouldn't have made the cuts. What I think really struck me about this photo is the story behind it. And that's something that Annette and I are going to discuss. So let me first of all give you a bit of background about where the photo was taken, and then I'll hand over to Annette to talk a little bit further about where the photo and the issues that it shows. So the photo is, what does it capture? So it captures a night scene, and it captures local traders in Ruru in Kenya. And what they're doing is they're selling groceries from the boots of their cars to local residents. And as Mary Mugure, who submitted the photo, informs us, the traders are actually taxi drivers. Now, during the pandemic, particularly in the early stages, taxi drivers were one of those groups who really saw their income drop. People weren't moving around the city. They didn't want to be in close proximity to others. And so they had to diversify and find new sources of income very fast. So what this photo shows is those taxi drivers having traveled to the rural areas, having purchased food there, then coming back to the cities and selling them from the boots of their cars to passing people at night. Now, to my mind, this speaks to the precarity of life and economic life in many parts of the world. But Annette, can I hand over to you? That's obviously something that you deal with on a day-to-day basis, working with the least developed countries. So please, Annette.
Thank you very much, Michael. And indeed, this photo speaks to the precarity of the situation. What you see in this photo is exactly what happened in many other parts of Africa. And I'll stick to Africa particularly because we witnessed these scenes in Rwanda, in Burundi, and not just in Kenya, in Uganda, in many countries in West Africa. And I have a few words that explain what I observe in this picture. Resilience, adaptation, diversification of incomes. And what we saw, and that led to these scenes happening everywhere, was communities that had lost their livelihoods and their income looking for ways to survive. And that happens in many LDCs. Women, men, children as well getting involved and looking for opportunities to be able to reach the market. Otherwise, this produce would rot in the fields. And here, it's not necessarily the farmers that grew this food, but it is these taxi drivers trying to find a way to work together with the farmers, the producers of the food, to make sure it reaches the market. So it's common in LDCs to find food rotting in the fields. And what the EIF tries to do is to support value addition, but because of COVID, that was impossible. So getting it out and bringing it to the consumers, I think, was one way to ensure that it doesn't rot, although value addition would have been the ideal, but factories were not working. There were situations where movement was impossible to be able to move goods from one part to the other. So just being able to find a way to get them to the market, which is a situation that happens in many LDCs. And these are some of the problems that the EIF tries to solve, looking at ways to bring connectivity between producers and sellers, getting communities involved, looking at avenues that can ensure that incomes and jobs are sustained. It's a really, really interesting picture, and it really deserves a slot among those ones that have made it among the top 8, because I think it really depicts situations on the ground and situations that we must continue to solve, situations that we must continue to put our efforts to make sure we improve lives we bring jobs onto the job market and we support income growth. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Annette. It's the points that you raised were picked up also in yesterday's high-level session by David Malpass in his remarks. And before we go on to look at the next photo, let me just add something on your point about the processing. And there was another photo that came in from the country that was the country from which the next photo was submitted, which was about that agro-processing at home. So yeah, it's not only was it a very good remark, there's also photo evidence to back it up. So let's now move on to the number 6 in our photo contest countdown. And please, Vishwa, let's see what this photo is. Okay, so what you see here is wellness on wheels. And when the panel saw this, we all had the same reaction. What's in the box? That's what we wanted to know. And so what we decided to do was we emailed Ishmael Badji in the Gambia to explain to us what's the business, what's in the box. So let's hear from Ishmael now about his reply to those questions.
I think the pandemic presented very unique challenges for the Gambian economy, especially in sectors like tourism, which typically generated a lot of revenues, businesses being closed, a lot of people transitioning to working from home. Healthcare in particular, the challenges were quite unique, being that our health systems are typically overburdened with limited resources. So the reallocation of focus to help manage the COVID pandemic left a gap in terms of the management of diabetes and hypertension and other non-communicable diseases, which inaugurates global health wellness on wheels, being able to go to people's homes in the rural area, in the urban area, and ensure that continuity of care happened was extremely crucial. From an economic standpoint, being able to also tap into people in the diaspora who normally support family members through remittances. IGH provided an avenue now to sponsor their loved ones' care, just to ensure that the quality that they deserve in terms of managing these diseases can happen on a continuous basis. And Wellness on Wheels was just that solution for their needs at the moment.
In the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of Gambians have faced various challenges that range from being able to get transportation to access to these healthcare facilities, or COVID-19 patients in isolation being unable to get essential products that they need. With our Wellness on Wheels delivery service, all our products and services are deliverable anywhere in the Gambia, from Banjul to Basse. Our services, for example, include all our point-of-care tests that can be conducted in-house anywhere as well. Our Wellness on Wheels delivery unit is equipped with an insulated box that protects all our products being delivered from the heat. From a privacy standpoint, all our products being delivered are securely packaged, and our logistics team is able to track it from dispatch all the way to delivery.
Well, I don't know about you, but I found that video absolutely fascinating, and also very encouraging that businesses in LDCs have, while some have suffered, others have obviously been able to use this as an opportunity to advance and grow and provide services that address the issues that have arisen during the pandemic. So congratulations to Ishmael, and our very best wishes to him and his business in the future. Now, that's obviously a business which I guess runs on an e-commerce platform. Our next photo, which features a warehouse in Hungary, depicts, should we say, perhaps a more traditional theme that we would associate with e-commerce, and the photo has been submitted by Simon Morishik Sabjan, sorry for the pronunciation, and I'm going to hand over to Jana to give us an overview of what she liked so much about this photo. So Jana, please.
Again, I like the composition of this image very much. The full frames overtaken by these boxes piled up high. And you see this lone worker there. The first word that came to me when I saw the photo was daunting. It must be difficult to be this person right now. It also shows something that we have never the opportunity to see, or very rarely we have the opportunity to see, the backstage of electronic commerce. Sometimes domestic, sometimes international. We don't know where these boxes came from. Submission, in my view, is very relatable again, as so many people across the world were forced to rely on online shopping, perhaps for the first time, or perhaps they increased the frequency with which they decided to order things online and receive them at home. I saw recently a study, I think it was by UNCTAD, that showed that the share of global retail sales that are made digitally jumped in 2020 from 14% the year before to 17%. So I think that's something that we all have experienced and we could all see in our daily lives. As I said before, all these workers that brought goods to our door allows us to stay safe, and the warehouse workers, of course, they play their role as well. So we see one of them when we have to thank people like him that helped us out during this period. The last thing that crossed my mind when I saw this is that we have, like, on one hand, there was this digital transformation that is likely to be enduring, some aspects of it, and it has the potential of creating new jobs, a new way of run parts of the economy. On the other hand, then the digital divide becomes an issue again, of course. Developing countries face a harder scenario. Maybe they don't have the tools to make this jump, or maybe it's more difficult for them to reach the tools that they need, and then to benefit from this potential job generating wave that most countries are seeing right now.
Thanks very much for that, Jana. And we're going to be hearing from a colleague a little bit later on who can go into a bit more detail about the e-commerce dimensions. I think what's interesting is to maybe contrast that photo with the points that you were making about tourism in Lviv, in Ukraine. Obviously, there are some services which have been very badly affected by the pandemic, and other services that have, really areas of the service economy that have really boomed, and they're clearly warehouse services, e-commerce are areas that have really grown. Now, we're on to our next photo, number 4 in our countdown, and this is a photo from Madagascar, and it's been submitted by Moira Rakotomalala Radamarisoa. Again, forgive me, je m'excuse pour la prononciation. And it shows a lady making and selling face masks and other materials in Madagascar. And to comment on the photo, I'm going to ask Annette to come in. Madagascar is one of a number of Francophone LDCs where the Enhanced Integrated Framework works. So please, Annette, would you like to come in and comment on the photo?
Thank you, Michael. And this was one photo that I really, really loved. One, because I love color, and there was lots of color in here. But two, among the top entries, this is one of those that was submitted by a woman, and which was another, I think, important aspect. And it also just shows women economic empowerment, women making the masks. And in Madagascar, I think this is a really, was a unique adaptation in a situation of dire need. As you might know, Michael, and others might know, Madagascar ranks first among sub-Saharan countries in Africa that exports the most of textiles and apparels. I think it is first to the EU in exports and a third in the US. And the textile industry is the largest formal employer with over 400,000 jobs, half of which are situated in the export processing zone. So you can imagine with the shutdown of production, how many jobs would have been lost. But this adaptation and taking up of mass production, I think was a good way to adapt in a difficult situation. And the WTO estimates that face mask exports increased by over 618% over the first 6 months of 2020. This and other producers contributed to this greater number of exports in face masks to save the world. I think face masks has been one of the protocols that have been advised by the WHO as mandatory to be able to stem a movement of this virus. So we're really glad to see women involved in this. We're glad to see evolution of a new sector. There's been lots of other investments in face mask production in other countries. And this situation we see in Madagascar is one of many that played out in many other countries in LDCs where we work. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Annette, for that great overview. So we've gone from 8 down to number 4. We're getting now towards, closer towards announcing our winner. But let's now go to the 3rd place photo. Okay, so this photo was submitted by Anthony Babatunde Alabi, who's based in Nigeria, and it really made me laugh because I just thought for any office worker over the last year, this photo speaks to us. This has been our experience. We haven't been in our regular office. We've been doing everything on Zoom. And Anthony, I have to compliment you on your posture. Perfect posture, very upright, very straight. I'm feeling that I should be sitting up straight now, actually talking to you, seeing your posture. Fantastic. Clearly what you're doing is, and what you explain in the background is that you are giving a training video to counterparts who are upcountry in Nigeria. Now, obviously that presupposes that there is an internet connection. So first and foremost, that's good news that you've been able to pivot towards electronic forms of training. One other thing I think which is important is that obviously, in the past, what I guess you would have had to do is jump in a car, drive up country, and that would have involved a cost. And so these forms of training obviously reduce the cost, potentially have a greater cast the net wider in terms of the people that we can reach. And so then the question that obviously, I guess anybody who works in an office wants to know is, are we going to carry on working in this way? Are we going to carry on using Zoom once we can come back to life in our offices and have face-to-face meetings, etc.? So to help answer this question, what I would like to do now is to phone another friend in the WTO. And the person I would like to call in now is Joan Apaku. And Joan is a councillor in the WTO's Council and Trade Negotiation Committee division. Now, Joanne is also the lead author of one of the WTO's most downloaded reports of 2020, and that is a report that looks at e-commerce. Now, Joanne, I know you can't answer that question of whether or not in the future we're all going to be still working through these video conference platforms. So let me ask you perhaps a simpler question. Are you surprised that amongst the finalists here, there are so many photos about different aspects of e-commerce? So Joanne, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Michael, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad to see all those great photos this afternoon. And to your question, no, I'm not surprised that among the finalists, there are photos from about different aspects of e-commerce. In fact, the pictures show that e-commerce looks different in different parts of the world. E-commerce is an area that is attracting increased attention from many stakeholders in many regions of the world. As you say, the fact that the Secretariat's e-commerce paper has attracted the most interest also attests to this. Michael, the potential is huge. In 2021, it's estimated that there'll be more than 2.14 billion digital buyers worldwide, and that mobile money payments are becoming mainstream and will have passed the 50% milestone in most markets by 2026. What the pandemic has done is simply to press that accelerator pedal. It has led to a further acceleration of digital transformation and reinforced how digitalization has infused every aspect of our daily lives. As our paper highlights, with the enforcement of measures to contain the pandemic, more consumers resorted to online shopping, and in fact, several brick and mortar businesses shifted resources online, and governments also devised solutions to facilitate online purchases. Now, we've also seen an increased demand for internet and mobile data services, either for social media, internet, or things like this, Zoom and etc. So the network capacity and spectrum to accommodate the shift to online activities has had to urgently adapt to facilitate consumer access. But as Jana noted earlier, this increased demand has not been for all online purchases of services. For example, tourism and travel services have declined abruptly. Now, while the pandemic has highlighted the importance of digital technologies in general, several vulnerabilities or challenges have also been exposed that need urgent attention. In particular, the glaring need to bridge the digital divide, both within and across countries, remains critical. Because what we've seen is that those traditional obstacles that have always been present were heightened and continue to hamper greater participation in e-commerce activities by small producers, sellers, and consumers in developing countries, particularly in LDCs, including, of course, for women entrepreneurs. Now, the crisis has also exposed the need to address challenges faced in addressing health and educational services, and underscored the need for efficient and affordable ICT services such as telecommunication, computer, and other IT services and emerging technologies. So while there have been immediate and short-term responses by governments, I think there's still a long way to go in terms of longer-term responses to these challenges for e-commerce to be more inclusive and further flourish and make its contribution to recovery efforts. What we've witnessed thus far could incentivize strengthened domestic, regional, and international cooperation, and further the development of policies and enabling digital infrastructure and services for online purchases and supply. Here at the WTO, these experiences and lessons are relevant to our ongoing discussions on e-commerce, both under the non-negotiating 1998 work program and the joint statement negotiations. Now, while there's need to improve the policy environment, the WTO's existing tools could be better leveraged. For example, the Services Agreement, the Information Technology Agreement, the Trade Facilitation Agreement, our work on standards and regulation, and of course, the development dimension, including through our Aid for Trade program. And I'm glad this is featuring here today. I'll stop here, Michael, and I thank you for your attention.
Thanks very much, Joanne. It's what I find fascinating about this photo contest is we can go from a photo of somebody sitting talking on a Zoom webinar on their laptop and go from there through to discuss the ongoing discussions around e-commerce at the WTO. So it's really interesting to see how trade issues really sort of pervade our daily lives. Now, we are at number 3 of our countdown. Before we go into the final 2, what I wanted to do is just quickly explain the rationale behind the final 2. So what you're going to see next is a photo that received a special mention from the panel. What it does is pick up the same issue that is shown in the winning photo. So in WTO terms, I guess that would be trade facilitation. And what we decided to do was to pick up this issue and give this photo and give it a special mention alongside that of the winning photo. So as you can see, this is a truck. It's at the Bondwe border, and that's a border between Uganda and the Democratic Republic of Congo. And it's a photo that was taken by Nyembezi Mvunga and Charles Kunaka. And Annette, thanks to her, she was able to catch up with Nyembezi to learn a little bit more about the photo and what it tells us, how it speaks to us in a development and trade and development context. So please, can we see the video of that interview?
Hello, Nyembezi. Thank you for joining me today. I want to thank you and Charles Kunaka for joining the context and for sending this illuminating photo of a scene that represents the situation for a large part of the trading community, the small-scale cross-border traders. The photo was taken at the Ugandan Pondwe border post, which is a border with the DRC, and prior to COVID-19, one of the busiest border crossings, serving as an entry point for the Northern Corridor. The picture was taken in January, about 8 months since the lockdown, and we hope that business has now started to open up. However, a number of COVID-19 protocols would still need to be observed. So Nyembezi, there are many interpretations to be discerned from the photo. And my first question is, what kind of problems does the picture highlight in regional trade?
First of all, thank you for having me, Annette. So this picture does highlight a couple of problems, but it also shows ingenuity on the part of authorities and traders to cope during the pandemic. Some of the problems relate to the high costs associated with obtaining a COVID-19 certificate, and also the restrictions imposed on the movement of people across borders. Both of these measures have resulted in a reduction in the volume of goods traded, as well as a reduction in the daily number of small-scale traders crossing borders. However, the picture also shows a positive, and that is countries participating in the World Bank Great Lakes Trade Facilitation Project have set protocols to reopen their common borders to small-scale trade, enabling traders to organize themselves in clusters and continue to trade. And this picture shows a truck and pondwe carrying goods belonging to traders who are trading in clusters.
Nyembezi, I'll pick up from that point. The photo is telling of a promising situation, looking at the load on the truck. What are your perspectives on regional small-scale trader fortunes moving forward?
Moving forward, small-scale trade will remain important for livelihoods, but for the Great Lakes region, it is also important from a macroeconomic perspective, as individuals and families residing in border communities rely heavily on cross-border trade to access necessary goods and services, and also to raise incomes, enabling them to survive. So to ensure continued fortunes in the future, it is important that trade policies combining both the hard and soft elements are aimed at increasing the range of opportunities for small traders so that they can continue to trade and profit from trade, even in circumstances where a pandemic of the like nature were to reoccur. At the World Bank Group, we are supporting investments in selected value chains that enable small-scale trader participation, and also addressing gender gaps by professionalizing women cooperatives so that they can become champions in upstream segments of the value chain. And both of these measures will ensure increased small trader fortunes in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Nyembezi. Thank you so much for your insights, and thank you so much for the picture. I'm sure many will enjoy looking at it and interpreting it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And my thanks to Nyembezi and Charles also for that photo that they submitted. So the moment of truth is upon us. Which photo has won the WTO photo contest? Please, Vishwa, let's see the winning photo. So this photo was submitted by Andre Rojas Corrales, and it talks about truck drivers. Now, why did we choose a photo about truck drivers? Again, this goes back, I think, to a point that Jana made in earlier on, talking about the unsung heroes of the pandemic. I think we'd all agree that medical workers have been, there on the front line. We'd all point to them as being essential workers, essential, obviously, in the face of the health crisis that we faced. Something I think that the pandemic has shown is that there are other categories of essential workers as well who perhaps need to be thought about. And so here, what we were keen to do when we saw this photo was to highlight just how essential those transport workers are in terms of getting goods across borders, and not just at the border that's pictured, but borders wherever they are across the world. Now, another reason that we chose this video is that it triggered a recollection in our minds that this particular border had been the subject of an Aid for Trade project in the past, an Aid for Trade project financed by the Inter-American Development Bank. So before we hear from the winner, what we thought we'd do is hear from the Inter-American Development Bank a bit about their work at that border. So please, Roxana, can you now play that video from the Inter-American Development Bank?
Hola, yo soy Jaime Granados, jefe de la División de Comercio e Inversión del Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo. Vamos a mostrarles un breve video sobre los proyectos de modernización fronteriza que estamos financiando en Centroamérica. El objetivo de estos proyectos es reducir los costos logísticos de las mercancías y las personas que pasan por los pasos de fronteras, así como también promover el bienestar social y económico de las poblaciones fronterizas.
El puesto fronterizo de Peña Blanca, en Nicaragua, se modernizó en el 2020 para facilitar el comercio. Con una operación de préstamo del Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo, se logró reducir los tiempos de despacho de mercancías de 36 horas a 89 minutos. Tránsitos de 6 horas a 15 minutos. Y atención de personas de 20 minutos a 4 minutos. Las entidades se integran en un macroproceso común con un sistema predictivo de riesgo interinstitucional, parada única e inspección conjunta para implementar la gestión coordinada de fronteras. Procesos de inspección fito y zoosanitarias que garantizan la inocuidad de los productos y animales vivos. Los puestos de fronteras financiados por el BID cuentan con una oficina sanitaria de estabilización para identificar casos de riesgos sanitarios en pasajeros y conductores. Tecnología no intrusiva de última generación, como las cámaras, perfiladores, básculas dinámicas, RFID, biométrica, entre otros, son componentes centrales que forman una inteligencia de gestión confiable. La atención de pasajeros, migrantes y turistas es impecable. En minutos, el usuario realiza su proceso migratorio y aduanero. Se atendió a más de 400 trabajadores por cuenta propia, 200 de los cuales continúan su actividad en una obra llamada Tiangue, fuera de la zona estéril, que cuenta con todos los servicios y una infraestructura moderna. Terminal de autobuses, sucursales bancarias, puestos de comida local, artesanías y oficinas de migración, que permiten a los turistas tener un espacio seguro y cómodo de compras y a los trabajadores generar sus ingresos. Centroamérica avanza con el BID en facilitación de comercio.
So that video from the Inter-American Development Bank, and our thanks to Jaime Granados for sharing that with us before this session, obviously gives you a very good perspective of the investment that had gone in and the economic returns that it was generating prior to the pandemic. So let's now hear from our winner. Unfortunately, Andre Rojas Corrales can't be with us. It's a little bit early in the morning in San Jose and at Peñas Blancas, where the photo was taken. So what we did was we thought we wouldn't interrupt his night's sleep, and we would record a video with him so then he can explain a little bit more about the photo, why he took it, and give us that context. So please, Roxana, can you now play that video with Andre?
When the picture was taken, Central America and the rest of the world were facing challenges driven from a pandemic unprecedented in our time. A vast range of sanitary measures were implemented to aid slowing down the virus that at the time had already taken the life of almost 500,000 people. Land border crossings were not accepted from the impact of the pandemic itself, as from the collateral consequences of also unprecedented sanitary measures. During those challenging times, truck drivers faced a slowing down of circulation influx. Nevertheless, an effective articulation of efforts was placed in motion. Public and private stakeholders showed solidarity that matched the resilience from the international merchandise transport sector. That gesture of solidarity and union on times of struggle made clear the main lesson driven from the pandemic. We cannot and will not succeed on isolated efforts. That sentiment inspired me to capture this picture, which is also a clear reminder that the pandemic not only presented new challenges, but reminded us the undeniable need to improve our land border crossings and to optimize procedures. Nations, regions, and the world community are faced with the need to prioritize economic recovery. And this goes in hand with the strengthening trade facilitation and global supply chains. COVID-19 impacted all areas in our lives. Nevertheless, the border quickly went back to business as usual, and lessons learned made it possible to enhance operations and even shorten processing times. The situation faced allowed us to expedite the implementation of necessary trade facilitation measures that were needed to reduce processing times and associated costs for trade. During the last year, interinstitutional coordination at the local, national, binational, and regional level has been key to address rising challenges and approach historic ones. The pandemic showed the importance of having adequate infrastructure, simple and expedite procedures, and keep working towards an effective automatization of procedures and single window initiatives. It was a clear reminder that trade facilitation not only lowered costs and time associated to trade, benefiting the private sector, mostly micro, small, and middle enterprises, but it also provides agile and accurate controls, reducing costs associated to those controls and benefiting particularly low and middle income countries.
So thank you so much, Andre, for giving us the context and the reason why you took this photo of truck drivers from El Salvador and Guatemala at the border. And my congratulations to you for this winning photo. And my thanks also to Olivier for agreeing to be part of the panel. My thanks to Roxana and to Vishva for all of the support that they've given us on this with this session. And a big word of thanks to Annette Sese-Mwemba and Jana, who've joined us live. And now let me just wrap up with a couple of closing thoughts. So first of all, I think the issues like the one that's pictured popped up land borders everywhere at the early stages of the pandemic. And indeed, I think at some borders, those problems have still not been resolved more than a year on. So some of the sessions that you're going to hear later today and tomorrow would explain how implementation of the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement can help address some of these situations. And my second thought is that the situation that these truck drivers faced was also encountered by a lot of other transport workers. And indeed, for some of these other transport workers, like those working in the maritime sector, it's been a far more serious concern. So let me just leave you with this one statistic from the International Maritime Organization, that at the end of December 2020, there were some 400,000 seafarers stranded on their ships, unable to return to their original port of embarkation because of COVID-related travel restrictions. So with that thought, let me wrap up there and thank everyone who submitted photos. My thanks to, again, the panel, and let me wish you a good rest of the day wherever you are in the world. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Michael. And thanks to the whole team. Bye.